Hey, all right, it's time for the country.
We begin today with the Republican Party. It held its second debate last night with the frontrunner again, a no-show. Everybody's favorite no-show. In fact, Chris Christie is now calling him Donald Duck because he ducks debates. It's kind of cheesy, but whatever. The debate was another lackluster disappointment. And so I guess I watched it so you don't have to. You don't want to subject yourself to an all-out snooze fest. Here's what happened. The first comment I'll make is Fox News was again the host. I think it was Fox Business technically, but yeah, we're talking about Fox News was the host of the debate, and it was again not up to the task. I really can't fathom what they think they're doing. Another introductory report by Brit Hume. You know, I can see that all the time on Fox News. In fact, you know, they had, and every channel had pre and post, shows that you could watch. So I really don't need a package from Brit Hume about what's happening at the debate. In fact, we all would just as soon skip it, Brit. I'm sorry. I like your work most of the time, but we don't need it. And then they do this like lengthy background footage, you know, like they're doing a news report to ask the first question. And, between these two, it was over 5 minutes from the start of the program until we heard from the first candidate. And I just wonder if Fox News thinks that we're tuning in to watch Fox News, because we're not. I certainly tune into Fox News from time to time. I do like the five. At least it's somewhat balanced. They do have a Democrat on the show that, speaks from their point of view, unlike almost every show that's on Fox News and MSNBC and CNN. You usually just get one side of the debate. So it's cool that they do that on the five. And in fact, Dana Perino was one of the hosts in the debate last night. She's probably the only one that did well. But the point is, Fox News kind of sucks. Even from a libertarian sort of leans right kind of guy like me, just like all the other stations, is why one of the reasons that we started this show, in fact. And so we're not tuning in to watch Fox News. We're tuning in to hear from the candidates. Just open the show and ask a question. Hey, welcome to the debate. Thanks everybody for coming. First question goes to you, Senator Scott. You know what I mean? That's all we need. And then second, the moderators were just poor. Like I said, the lone exception was Dana Perino, who did, pretty decent, did hold Mike Pence to task at one point, which I loved. Quite frankly, the debate would have been better with her by herself. There's a guy named Stuart Varney who's got a Fox show, on Fox Business show. Every time I've seen it, I've watched it for 2 minutes and changed the channel. He was terrible, stumbling through questions, sometimes interrupting his fellow moderators. He's directly reading from a book and still can't get the question out. Just accepted every response. Like he just phoned it in. And then there was also, it's kind of unfair. Like I get it. Don't send the hate mail. But it's got to be said, the third host, her name's Elia Cameron. She's from Univision. I'm sure she's wonderful on that show, on that station. But she was terrible. She was ineffective. She has such a thick accent. Sometimes I had to run it back a little bit to understand exactly what she said. And you saw people like Chris Christie like sort of leaning in and like straining to understand her. And that happened more than once. Now, he didn't say anything about it. He was very gracious, much more than I am, I guess, right now, which is not a good sign that you're more gracious than Chris Christie. But nonetheless, it just wasn't helpful. And I think because of maybe the language barrier or maybe some of the other, candidates picked up on it. Among the three moderators, she was the one that they were able to interrupt and sort of take over control of the entire show most successfully. Okay, and so finally, I think, they lost control of the debate early and often. So, there was just so much crosstalk through significant portions of the 2 hours that I just don't understand. This is the second time that happened. It happened in the first debate last month. I don't understand why Fox News didn't have a plan for that. And it seemed like they were turning off people's microphones, but the audience could still hear them when they chimed in, so then there'd still be a reaction from a bunch of people. Like, they need to figure this out. I would pull out the audience. There's no reason to have an audience there. It sort of makes it more like a pep rally than a debate. It also gives the moderators much more control over what happens. And yeah, I would simply turn on people's mics when they're called on and turn them off otherwise. And don't give them a choice, and make sure that they know that. We're not going to turn your mic on until you're called on. So you can yap all you want, and it's just not going to be heard by anybody. So maybe they can fix that by the time we get around to the next one. I don't even know if the next one is scheduled, quite honestly. I probably should. We'll get back to you on that. As far as the candidates go, I'll start with Ron DeSantis. He improved I thought he was decent in the first debate. I think he improved this time around, and he did pretty well. He was able to attack Trump on deficit spending while touting his own record in Florida, which I think he needs to do more of. He quoted that he has the #1 ranked economy, according to CNBC, and the #1 ranked education system, according to, I think it was U.S. News and World Report, maybe it was USA Today, I can't remember. But perhaps we'll show you that clip in a second. Of course, he built the free state of Florida. So he handled the pandemic, I think, better than any politician I'm aware of, any leader I'm aware of. And I honestly don't understand why more voters don't prefer his record to some of the more flashy candidates' talk, And he said this a couple times. I think it's a good line, and he should keep saying it. A lot of people talk about getting rid of progressive prosecutors that aren't prosecuting crimes. I did it. A lot of people talking about lowering the unemployment rate. I did it. It's at a 50-year low in Florida, right? So he needs to keep doing that because, quite frankly, he's got the best record of anybody, including our ducking frontrunner. So I really hope that if there is another debate, I'm sure there is, but if there is another debate, number one, Donald Duck shows up to defend his record, and number two, people will start to compare Mr. DeSantis' record with Mr. Trump's. Mr. DeSantis also came off as a strong leader, shutting down another, one of these kindergarten debate exercises. Last month it was raise your hand if this, and it's so stupid. He cut that off and he said, look, I want to answer the question. This is not a, raise your hand situation. The kindergarten, exercise this time around was, let's play Survivor. Everybody write one candidate that you would vote off the island, and he shut that down right away. So I thought, he appears to be a strong leader when he does that sort of thing, and I think he should do it more. Mr. DeSantis also, like I said, he shut that down last time. He still, though, suffers from that pain smiley flashes after a good answer. He'll be like, yeah, and then he'll just kind of be like, it's not quite like that, but it looks like it pained him to be having a happy face, and so he's kind of got to let it out at that point. So it's just weird, man. I don't get that, and he needs to wipe it. Like, if that never happens again, it'd be the best thing that could ever happen for him. He nonetheless did well and struck me as the winner of the debate in a night that, again, was a night to forget. And in fact, let's go ahead and pull some clips, and we'll just play a couple highlights of Mr. DeSantis' performance, and we'll do that for all of the candidates here. All right, so here is DeSantis' first pretty decent clip here. Let's take a look.
Washington are shutting down the American dream with their reckless behavior. They borrowed, they printed, they spent, and now you're paying more for everything. They are the reason for that. They have shut down our national sovereignty by allowing our border to be wide open. So please spare me the crocodile tears for these people. They need to change what's going on. And where's Joe Biden? He's completely missing in action from leadership. And you know who else is missing in action? Donald Trump is missing in action. He should be on this stage tonight. He owes it to you to defend his record where they added $7.8 trillion to the debt. That set the stage for the inflation that we have now. I can tell you this, as governor of Florida, we cut taxes, we ran surpluses, we've paid down over 25% of our state debt, and I vetoed wasteful spending when it came to my desk. And as your president, when they send me a bloating spending bill that's going to cause your prices to go up, I'm going to take out this veto pen and I'm going to send it right back to them.
Ilya, you mentioned the question.
There's that look I'm talking about right there. It's just weird. He's like so excited he got a thing on, and then it's like this. I don't understand it. Anyway, let's check the next one. Okay, here's the next shot for Governor DeSantis. This is a question from Mr. Barney.
China invested $12 billion in Latin America just last year. They signed strategic partnerships with 7 countries, including Mexico. And China's military ties to the region now include arms sales and training exercises. Are you comfortable with China deepening ties with our southern neighbors?
Of course not. And the reason why we're in this mess is because elites in D.C. for far too long have chosen surrender over strength when it comes to the CCP. Some people in our country got rich, our industrial base got hollowed out, and they have been able to build the second most powerful military in the entire world. We need a totally new approach to China. We are going to have real hard power in the Indo-Pacific, like Reagan, to deter their ambitions. We're going to have economic independence from China, where we're decoupling our economy, and we are going to go after the cultural power they have in this country. As governor of Florida, I banned the CCP from buying land in our state. We should do that all across these United States. We shouldn't have them in our universities. We shouldn't have Confucius Institutes. So you see a country in decline, our power's in decline. China's going to surpass us this decade, and if they do that, that's going to affect every single American household. As your president, I am not going to let that happen. I'm going to reverse this country's decline. We are going to choose strength, not surrender, when it comes to the CCP.
That was a pretty good answer. I like how he has this format, right? Like he, sort of states the problem, what we should do about it, and then the final part, which is missing from everybody else, is here's how I handled that in Florida. And this, is, to me, is the message that he needs to keep repeating. Everybody talks about this stuff, but here's how I've done it. All right. We are going to move on. All right. Here's another spot from DeSantis. I think 3 is enough. Let's finish off with this.
That's why, as Commander-in-Chief, I'm going to use the U.S. military to go after the Mexican drug cartels. They are killing our people. And the stories that I've seen in Florida, we had an infant, 18 months. Parents rented an Airbnb. And apparently the people that had rented it before were using drugs. The infant was crawling, the toddler was crawling on the carpet and ingested fentanyl residue and died. Are we just going to sit here and let this happen, this carnage happen in our country? I am not going to do that. So I guarantee you on day one, this border is going to be a day one issue for me as president. We're going to declare it a national emergency. Yes, we'll build the wall. We'll do remain in Mexico. But those Mexican drug cartels are going to be treated like the foreign terrorist organizations that they are.
Yeah, that's really good. As much as I think by saying it's really good, I mean he's going to score points this way. Right? There's a big swath of the Republican base. It's like, yeah, go invade Mexico. I think it's a little far-fetched. I could see troops stationed to stop illegal immigration on our side of the fence, certainly to interdict where, the drug cartels are coming across. But I don't see much other than that without Mexico's agreement. And at least for the time being, the Mexican president is saying hell no to that. So we'll see what happens. So on to Nikki Haley, who I think is probably the second place here. And we'll probably only cover 3 of the participants in terms of sharing videos with you. But she came out firing. She attacked just about every other candidate on stage at one point or another. And she had some good one-liners. She really went after I cannot say his name right anymore. ever since I started saying Vivek, and then I heard it was Vivek. Sorry, Vivek Ramaswamy, who I am sure she sees as the next step in the climbing ladder, right? She's behind him. She's starting to catch up, I think, but I think she wants to, eliminate him and take on those voters. She took a shot at DeSantis on fracking. He brushed it off pretty well. I think he's kind of weak there, where he did campaign in 2018 on stopping fracking. And by weak, I mean in the Republican electorate, especially with what's happened with gas prices and Biden's energy policy. Gas prices are in a very different place now than they were in 2018. So I think he needs a better answer for that. He answered it well. He basically said, look, there was a constitutional amendment that voters voted for to stop fracking in Florida. But he also had issued an executive order that Mrs. Haley is attacking him for on day 2 of his governorship, where he said, let's go ahead and try and stop fracking. So he should just say, look, we're in a different spot now. That was 2018. Gas prices were great. Everything was great. Since then, Biden has come in, et cetera. And now I've changed, right? So that'd be a way to address it. He brushed it off decently. I just think that her positions on Ukraine and other things in the world are way too globalist and a way too neocon. I don't think Nikki's ever met a war she didn't want to fund or participate in on Ukraine and on China and some other issues. I don't think that's going to help her win ultimately in the Republican Party. Now, it may in a general, but I don't think she's going to get there because of that. At the same time, she is a very strong woman, unwilling to back down in this male-dominated debate stage. And, if Trump is any indication, the Republican voters, they reward that sort of fighting. So she could be a strong force if she were able to break out of some of her past positions and lean towards the America First populism that's going on right now. And again, let's go ahead and look at a couple of her clips. All right, so here's Governor Haley.
Of America.
Governor Haley, you raise your hand.
I think we need to look at exactly what happened. Biden showed up on that picket line, but why are those workers actually there? It's because of all of the spending that he has pushed through in the economy that's raised the inflation. So when you look at the fact that we are paying higher gas prices, higher grocery prices, $7,000 more a year for families, what we need to do is I came out with an economic plan, eliminate the gas and diesel tax so that they have more money in their pocket. Let's focus on going after middle America and cutting taxes for middle America and collapsing those brackets. Let's get rid of unfair distortions like the state and local tax that they give to wealthy people in blue states and paid by red states. And let's make sure we make the small business taxes permanent. They only made those temporary. They made the corporate taxes permanent. Let's focus on what it takes to get more cash in the pockets of workers. That's when we'll be able to deal with strikes like this, not sitting on a picket line like Joe Biden is.
Thank you, Governor.
So that was a pretty good answer. I mean, I find it difficult to connect Joe Biden's extremely terrible economic policy with that current strike. I mean, most of the folks that know what they're talking about in terms of the UAW strike in the auto workers world has to do with two real things. The first is during the financial crisis, there were a bunch of bailouts for the big three automakers in America. Some of that was the UAWs, the workers themselves, agreeing to a bunch of concessions they never had before, including lowering of their benefits and a change to the way they're paid and, lowering their pensions and all sorts of things. I don't remember the details, but that began it. And fast forward to COVID, post-COVID, mostly post-COVID, those big three are doing very well. Now, we should color that with, and I didn't realize this till yesterday, I saw this, that one of the big budget-busting bills that the Biden administration has pushed through with Congress when they first came in included an $86 billion bailout of auto workers' pensions, because those pensions are just ridiculous. They promise these payouts, and they're just unsustainable. And probably better than I do, all the Jimmy Hoffa stuff with the auto workers union pensions. So they've been robbed in the past. I don't know that that's still going on, but I sure wouldn't be surprised. And they never can pay out the benefits. They're always insolvent, and the government just bailed them out. So I'd love to see a study that kind of takes all of the things that have happened government-wise with UAW and what the workers are asking for and see how that all shakes out. But the point being, I'm being very long-winded, I'm sorry, but the point is that subsequently, recently, those, Chevy, Ford, and Stellaris, which is the old Chrysler, have done very well for themselves. Sales are up 30 or 40%, CEO pay is up 40%, and workers have not gotten a raise in that period. So they're saying, give us 40% too. I think the other thing that's going on that's a major concern is EVs, right? They're a lot easier to make. You need about 2/3 less employees to make them because they're not these big complex combustion engines. It's just a battery and 4 wheels, basically. So they're at a turning point, right? And so they're basically saying, look, we're not going to have a lot of these members anymore. We better get what we can get while we can, because all of those automakers are turning to EVs. So I think those are the two main issues. I mean, sure, is inflation third part of it, but I just think it's a stretch where you're trying to score points against Biden for, quite frankly, a thing that is a lot to do with macroeconomic things that Biden can't necessarily control, unfortunately. Hey, all right, it's the country. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Justin Weller. Here we rely on premium subscribers to produce this show and all of our content. If you like what we're doing, would you consider heading over to www.thecountry.news, where you can become a premium subscriber for just $5 a month. Please also subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this show, and follow us on the X, where you'll find us under the handle @JWTheCountry. Thanks so much. Now on to the show. Okay, so we're back, and let's see Nikki get into it a little bit more with some other guys.
It told everybody to come, and now we've seen 6 million people cross the border. We've had more fentanyl that have killed Americans in the Iraq, Vietnam, or Afghanistan wars combined. We need to make sure that we are a country of laws. The second we stop being a country of laws, we give up everything this country was founded on. So we have to secure the border. The way we do that is, first of all, defund sanctuary cities. You see what's happening in Philadelphia right now. It's got to stop. We need to make sure we put 25,000 more Border Patrol and ICE agents on the ground and let them do their job. I spent 400 miles down that border, and I'm telling you, Border Patrol agents aren't allowed to do their job. Let's go back to remain in Mexico policy. Instead of catch and release, let's go to catch and deport.
What about what about the aid that federal taxpayers are paying to deal with the root causes? It's not working?
The only aid that we should be spending right now is to secure the border, the southern border, the northern border, period. We need to keep Americans safe, and right now Americans are not safe. Only when we fix the immigration system, only when we get the border secure, should we ever look at putting any more money into this. Our money should be about keeping Americans safe. We're not doing that. Joe Biden's not doing that. And you mentioned Congress and shutting down government. I'll make it clear. We have to change the budget process. In 4 years, in 40 years, Congress has only delivered a budget on time 4 times in 40 years. If they don't keep the government open, they should not get paid. No pay, no budget. That's the way we should do it.
That was really good. I like that a lot. And I just discovered that budget item. I put it in a column on thecountry.news. You can check it there, www.thecountry.news. Just recently, that 40 years, and they've only delivered four budgets 4 times is ludicrous. And yeah, she's taken on a lot of special interest there. I'm really proud of that. And there was a little bit of America First in there too. Build the border, then we can talk about other policies. So from that perspective, that was a great answer. All right, we'll do one more from Mrs. Haley, I should say. Here we go.
Low. 3 years ago, you signed a pledge to support law enforcement. Now, pledges are a nice idea, but what's your actual plan to get more police on our streets?
Well, and I actually did it in South Carolina, too. You know, what we knew in South Carolina was you take care of those who take care of you. We have to start taking care of law enforcement, but it's not just taking care of them with words. It's making sure that you also follow through on what they do. Right now, we have a lot of stolen guns on the street. Well, these law enforcement officers, they arrest these people, and then they go and they're let out the very next day. So law enforcement feels like no one has their back. We have to start prosecuting according to the law. We have to make sure we have the backs of law enforcement, and we have to make sure that we're a country of law and order. But I want to go back to China because I don't think we spent enough time on that. Right now, we have to look at what government's doing to hurt us against China, too. You have a company, U.S. Antibiotics, that produces amoxicillin, the #1 antibiotic that we need. And right now, there is a company in Bristol, Tennessee, that produces that, yet our federal government only gets it from China. We need to be focusing on companies that produce in America and supporting those companies that produce in America, not companies that are helping China.
Governor, we will.
Yeah, so that was good. I mean, she knows her stuff. She's up to speed on the issues. She's got her talking points. I agree that China is probably the main issue. But again, every time we turn to Ukraine, she's ready to pump more money into that endless regime change war. And so, I just think she's going to end up being hurt by that. But let's move on. So let me talk a little bit about the rest of the guys on the stage. Doug Burgum. So he's that guy that nobody's ever heard of from North Dakota. He's the governor there and a former businessman, apparently billionaire. He did surprisingly well. He was the first at the very beginning to jump into the debate before he was called on, and had a really tight, well thought out, concise message to deliver with, policy prescription. So that was impressive. I will say too, though, that probably led more than anything to sort of the crosstalk and the sort of spiraling out of control that I talked about. The whole debate sort of ran off the rails once he did that. I just don't think, his support is next to zero. Most of these guys' support is next to zero, actually. And, but his is very low. He probably won't be in the next debate. And, I think he was looking to maybe score a cabinet post in the next administration. And at this point, that should be the aim of his campaign. Chris Christie, he joined Doug Burgum on the list of people who will never win but did well at the debate. In fact, I think Mr. Christie is a lifelong member of that list. Governor Christie was best when he was attacking Donald Trump for his policies. He, like we heard Ron DeSantis talk about, $7 trillion in deficit over 4 years, leading to a lot of the problems we have today with inflation and the debt crisis, and the deficit is $2 trillion again. And he was the main opponent of Mr. Trump again calling him Donald Duck for his failure to show and to explain to the people his policies and his record. I thought that was when he was most eloquent. He basically said, look, you owe it to the American people and to the folks up here and to, respect for the process to be here talking to us. And quite honestly, I just don't see how anybody could cast a vote for someone in a Republican primary when that same person doesn't show up to the Republican primary debates. Like, you got to earn this, man. You don't just get given you don't just get the nomination given to you. That's about as anti-democratic as a thing could be. It's what the Democrats do with their superdelegates and, sort of squeezing out Bernie a couple times. So, and not allowing RFK Jr. to compete with Biden currently, right? He's polling it. I saw a poll last week. RFK Jr. was at 24% against Biden. 24%. That's higher than DeSantis is against Trump. And, or at least it was in that poll, right? And they don't let him debate. So, that's not the way to do this thing, and that's not the way to pick a nominee. And I frankly will never vote for Donald Trump if he doesn't show up to this debate. I'm probably not going to vote for him. I'm certain I'm not going to vote for him anyway in the general. But I think that should be something that people really think about. Why would you vote for somebody who just kind of sticks his nose in your process? Sticks up his nose at your process, if you will. Yeah, so Donald Duck, it really didn't land. It was a poor amalgam of Mr. Trump's nicknaming and came off as a high school debate strategy, quite honestly. And then Tim Scott, he improved from last month. He was kind of a snooze last month's debate, in the first debate. And so he sounded more eloquent. He definitely, got to use his stump speech some more and really kind of connected on a visceral level with voters, I think. But again, kind of like Mr. Burgum, it's just not enough. It's too late. And the other thing I'll say about Tim Scott is after Burgum started interrupting the flow, Tim Scott was the biggest person that did this. He did this more than anyone. And he led the league in interruptions and pleas to the moderators to speak. He kept speaking right after everybody spoke, and he just kept talking. He probably disrupted this thing more than anyone, and maybe somebody must have told him he should try to interrupt every other candidate every time, just get a word out, but it didn't work. If anything, it made him look weak and desperate. And again, like he was able to do his stump speech, and he sounded very good at times, little bits of it, like not the whole time, but a little portion of it. He just didn't make a big enough impact, and he's probably close to done. Vivek Ramaswamy, who many believe won the first debate, was not as good the second time around. It sounded rehearsed and chopped. I honestly couldn't stop looking at his hair. Let's see if we can find this here. His hair looks really strange in this debate. Even my wife said something about it. Sorry, it took me a while to find this, but like, look at this. What is going on there? I do not understand this. Is he like, what is going on with that stuff? Look at that. Look at that right there. That's crazy. I don't know what he's doing. And it looks even weirder from the front. So yeah, he's got his new blown out hair going on. So yeah, I couldn't stop looking at that hair, and I couldn't stop listening to. I had to stop listening to him after he flip-flopped regarding his competitors. In the first debate, he said he's the only person on stage that isn't bought and paid for. And then in this debate, he said something like, "Oh, I just don't think anybody should disparage any of my fellow competitors on the stage." And this clip is Tim Scott taking him to task for that. So he just came off as disingenuous and kind of sleazy, hokey, salesy. It's kind of, I put this on Twitter weeks ago. He reminds me of like the Music Man, or the guy from The Simpsons, Monorail, where he's just, in a small town selling them his snake oil and then on to the next town. The rest of the candidates did take him to task on a host of issues again, including what I just talked about, his ties to China, his inexperience. They really seem to all think that he's number 3, and if they can pick him off, then they can go after DeSantis and then maybe Trump. I don't know. But Mr. Ramaswamy performs, he's really good. Well, he's really, really good in long-form speeches or discussions, like a podcast, but he just really isn't good in these debate sessions. He sounded like he's reading from a script, and he sounded kind of pandering and a little desperate and a little, like I said, snake oily. I think he's losing steam. And so then we have Mike Pence. He was boring, condescending, and slow. So the poor guy just needs to quit. But by the end of the debate, I think, at the end of the night, this debate was extremely disappointing. No candidate had the sort of night that we all need them to have that might propel them into a closer race with Donald Trump. In fact, after watching, I began to have a terrible feeling that many have already predicted. Obviously, the polls say this. I just don't believe the polls. But I just started to have this terrible feeling that Donald Trump is going to be the nominee. And despite the fact that Governor DeSantis was asked this directly, and he said something like, polls don't elect presidents, voters do, which is a nice thought. Well, the voters also answer the polls. And so I hope he's right, but it just doesn't sound like he is. At the end of the day, this debate, this night, it's not going to change any polls. by very much at all, in my opinion. So these folks that were on this stage, they really need to figure out how to shake things up within the next 2 months, or we're going to be stuck with Donald Trump as the Republican nominee for president. So one of my fellow Substack sites, and by that I mean, Substack is a website whereby folks like me, independent journalists, creators, and those such, you can go to www.thecountry.news and you'll be directed to my Substack. There's another great one called Public. It's actually run by Michael Schellenberger, who you may remember from the Twitter files. He actually testified in Congress with Matt Taibbi about the Twitter files. And he started this site, Public, and it's really excellent. They do wonderful reporting. Well, they are reporting that Dr. Anthony Fauci not only prompted the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 paper that claimed, this is very early on when the pandemic was just starting, he convinced folks to write this paper that claimed COVID was likely from natural origins, and it was published in Nature magazine. In fact, let me find it for you right here. All right, so here it is on Public. You can find this at public.substack.com. Fauci diverted U.S. government away from lab leak theory of COVID's origin, sources say. So first, though, I want to show you this paper, the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. And that paper is, hang on, let me find it. Okay, so here we have it. It's on nature.com. It's actually their medicine section, the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. And this was the paper that came out. Again, what's the date on this bad boy? March 2020, 17th March 2020. And it basically said that the most likely cause of the COVID virus is natural. And so that's the proximal cause, right, is it natural. Now, the interesting thing about that is that we are now learning that not only did Mr. Fauci ask these authors to write this after a conference call he held, and then 4 days later this paper they called came out. All right, so I know this is a lot to take in. So Fauci had them write this article in Nature, and then they testified in Congress. And this is also from Public. Last week, and this is from July. So last week, two of the top scientific advisors to Anthony Fauci testified before the House Select Subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic. Bob Gary told members of Congress that the novel coronavirus had emerged in nature and not from a lab. His colleague, Kristen Anderson, denounced Republicans for spreading a conspiracy theory that he and Gary had worked with Fauci in early 2020 to produce disinformation about COVID's origin in the form of a March 17, 2020 Nature Medicine paper. This is the paper we're talking about. This paper dismissed the lab leak theory and has been viewed nearly 6 million times since its publication. Anderson, a professor at Scripps Research, acknowledged that some earlier heavily publicized emails between him, his colleagues, and Fauci had shown that they had previously considered the lab leak hypothesis as a serious possibility. But Anderson told Congress after he and his co-authors had carefully considered the evidence, they concluded that culturing in different cells or animal species in a lab, which can make a virus more infectious and well adapted for humans and other animal species, had not occurred, and that the virus had spilled over from wildlife to humans. But now, Public and Racket have obtained hundreds of previously unreleased emails and Slack direct messages which cover the period when Anderson and his colleagues collaborated to write that article, Proximal Origin. Those communications paint a starkly different picture from the one Anderson and Gary presented in Congress last week. They show that Anderson and his colleagues clearly thought it was indeed possible not only that the virus that causes COVID-19 had leaked from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, but specifically that it had been cultured in a laboratory. Okay? So there's the first bit of cover-up. The second is that subsequent to that, Mr. Fauci diverted many agencies away from the lab leak theory. So let's find that. Hang on. So here's what's come out more recently from public. The former director of the U.S. National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Anthony Fauci, who led the U.S. government's response to the coronavirus pandemic, visited CIA headquarters to, quote, influence its review of COVID-19 origins, the House Oversight Committee reported yesterday. Last month, committee chair Brad Wenstrup made headlines when he revealed 7 CIA analysts with significant scientific expertise on the agency's COVID-19 discovery team received performance bonuses after changing a report to downplay concerns about a possible lab origin of the virus. Now a months-long investigation by Racket and Public, Racket is Matt Taibbi's site, which included interviews with the CIA whistleblower behind last month's revelations and others in a position to know, reveals that Fauci not only visited the CIA, but also pushed the controversial proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2 paper published by Nature Medicine in meetings at the State Department and the White House. So, let's recap what we've got so far. Fauci holds a conference call, gets these guys to write this paper, convinces them that they need to write this paper about how SARS-CoV-2 is naturally occurring. Then he takes that paper around to the CIA and other agencies and uses it to convince them that COVID, SARS-CoV-2, is naturally occurring. So, this is killing me. Now look at this quote. Fauci, this is from a CIA whistleblower. Fauci's expert opinions were a significant consideration and were part of our classified assessment, said the CIA whistleblower, a decorated and long-serving CIA officer with expertise in Asia. His opinion, meaning Fauci's, substantially altered the conclusions that were subsequently drawn. Can you believe this? With this reporting and the knowledge that Dr. Fauci lied directly to Congress and the American public about his funding of gain-of-function research. Let's show you that. Hang on. Let's show him lying about gain-of-function research. Okay, here he is testifying before Congress with Senator Rand Paul.
Dr. Fauci, knowing that it is a crime to lie to Congress, do you wish to retract your statement of May 11th where you claimed that the NIH never funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan?
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress.
Microphone.
Your microphone.
Senator Paul, I have never lied before the Congress, and I do not retract that statement. This paper that you are referring to was judged by qualified staff up and down the chain as not being gain of function.
So
let me finish.
You take an animal virus and you increase its transmissibility to humans,
right.
You're saying that's not gain of function?
Yeah, that is correct. And Senator Paul, you do not know what you are talking about, quite frankly. And I want to say that officially. You do not know what you are talking about. Okay, you get one person.
Let's read from the NIH definition of gain of function. This is your definition that you guys wrote. It says that scientific research that increases the transmissibility among animals is gain of function. They took animal viruses that only occur in animals and they increased their transmissibility to humans. How you can say that is not gain of function?
It is not.
It's a dance, and you're dancing around this because you're trying to obscure responsibility for 4 million people dying around the world from a pandemic.
And let's let Dr. Fauci.
I have. Well, now you're getting into something. If the point that you are making is that the grant that was funded as a sub-award from EcoHealth to Wuhan created SARS-CoV-2, that's where you are getting. Let me finish.
We don't know.
Well,
we don't
wait
know
a minute.
If it did come from the lab, but all the evidence is pointing that it came from the lab, and there will be responsibility for those who funded the lab, including yourself.
I totally.
Okay, now I've just hopped over to Twitter. This is the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, and I'm going to pull up this email. Well, let me read this to you first. New email reveals that Dr. Fauci was aware of risky gain-of-function research occurring in Wuhan, China, prior to the emergence of COVID-19. So this is an email from Dr. Fauci in February of 2020. And the quote is, "The suspicion was heightened by the fact that scientists in Wuhan University are known to have been working on gain-of-function experiments to determine the molecular mechanisms associated with bat viruses adapting to human infection, and the outbreak originated in Wuhan." So, yeah, he uses a lot of government speak there to cover his butt. But he's admitting in this email that the subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic he's admitting in that email that he knows that this is gain-of-function research. So I know I'm kind of chopping this up a little bit, so let's go back and just keep recapping, okay? And that happened before he got the article printed. So he writes in an email, "We know they were doing gain-of-function research in Wuhan." Okay? And that Wuhan is where the virus originated. That's what that email said. Then we have him, that email was February. So about a month later, in March, convincing scientists to write a paper that says it's not gain of function and it didn't come from the lab. No, they say it didn't come from the lab, it came from nature. Then we have him going around to the CIA and other agencies with that same paper to tell them that it was not a lab leak, but a natural occurrence. And then what we also know is that this grant that we're talking about was also funded by DARPA, which is our military. They're the Advanced Research Project for the military. Okay? So that's the last thing. It's a bioweapon. And we talked about yesterday how Victoria Nuland admitted that we had bioweapons labs in the Ukraine as well. So you see how this all starts to come together? I mean, based upon those facts, I honestly wonder why Dr. Fauci has not been identified as a person of interest in the case of over 1 million COVID deaths in America and 4 million COVID deaths around the world. I just wonder, are Donald Trump's and Joe Biden's mishandling of classified documents, where we have 2 special prosecutors from the Department of Justice assigned and working on those cases over some documents that nobody's proven have been used or lost or had any implication other than they're idiots who had secret documents when they're not supposed to. We have 2 special prosecutors working on those dumb cases. Is that more important than uncovering a potential conspiracy to make bioweapons and then cover it up when they leak from a lab and kill millions? It buggers the imagination. What on earth is our government doing to us every day? A couple last things to cover. We've been talking a lot about government shutdowns lately. Speaker Kevin McCarthy this morning rejected another continuing resolution, those gimmicks for Congresses that never do their job. Again, they've only passed a budget on time 4 times in the past 40 plus years. So they never finish their job, is basically what we're saying, and haven't for decades. They passed a continuing resolution yesterday that keeps this outrageous funding that caused $2 trillion deficit this year. Yeah, let's go for another $2 trillion deficit next year, because $33 trillion in debt and inflation at 7% just isn't bad enough. So the Senate passed this continuing resolution yesterday. Oh, and they added 40 or 50 more billions of dollars. No, I'm sorry, that's a different one. There's so many continuing resolutions going on right now, I get confused. The Senate continuing resolution had $6 million extra for Ukraine and $6 million for disaster relief. Presumably that's Maui, but they don't say Maui, they say disaster relief. So it's probably just lining somebody's pocket. I think Mr. McCarthy should reject that deal. and I've written about it. You can see it on thecountry.news. It's called Mr. Speaker, Shut Down This Government. We should not allow, and we cannot allow, this to continue. We cannot allow this government to continue to function with $2 trillion deficits and no legislative process for fixing it. We should get ready for a shutdown. A couple other quick things. The impeachment inquiry hearing began this morning. I watched some of it after rewatching the debate, and it's just the typical congressional hearing. I do think that many of the Republicans had some decent things to say. Few folks on the Democratic side, especially Ro Khanna, had some interesting things to say. This was the sort of typical hearing that they have around constitutionality of impeachment and what should be required, so there wasn't really any fact-based questioning, but there were a lot of gimmicks going on. We can expect this circus to come to town every day for the next few weeks, one thing that's clear is that there is no requirement to connect Joe Biden to the money coming in vis-a-vis Hunter Biden. And, I think Jonathan Turley put this best. He usually has the way of it in terms of the law from a constitutional perspective. He basically said, look, everything that we've seen so far clearly demonstrates, and nobody can argue, that Hunter Biden was corrupt, and he was corruptly peddling influence, which Jonathan Turley both said is one of the most awful aspects of our government, and two, is Washington is awash with this sort of corruption, where you basically get paid to do stuff for the person paying you. And so, it's quite clear based upon the facts we have now that Hunter Biden was participating in influence peddling. What's also clear is we have the bank records that show him being paid $24 million through 21 shell companies for work that nobody can really identify what exactly he was doing. There's no invoice. There's no information about what he provided these foreign interests for $24 million. And that finally, it is not required in terms of a bribery allegation, either from a legal point of view, like if you're being arrested for bribery and tried for bribery, or from an impeachment point of view. In fact, Jonathan Turley just described, he just represented a judge in such a case where his family, the judge's family, received the benefits, right? And that's the same with bribery. Just because you pay my wife or my son money doesn't mean that you're not bribing me, and we can still find you guilty of it. So there's no requirement to say Joe Biden, physically received money from Hunter Biden or any of these other folks. All that's required is to show that he knew what was going on and he did things on their behalf. And, this is the inquiry. This is the hearing about an inquiry. This is not the actual impeachment vote that we're talking about. So there's still evidence to be found. And Jonathan Turley, and I think I've said this too, will say, look, I'm not ready to say he should be impeached or he's guilty of something, but there's certainly enough evidence to show that we need an inquiry to find out if there is such evidence. And so that's where we are. And that's what we're trying to do there. And then the last thing is there are rumors now based upon the, look at this, Republican race about to shake with late entry. And they're talking about Governor Glenn Youngkin of Virginia. I think of him very similar to DeSantis in terms of being able to govern effectively. So it might be interesting if he were to enter the race. But this is actually a scoop from Robert Costa, who works at the Washington Post now. He's a Washington inside guy, so he would be in a position to know or to repeat, somebody leaking this to try and get Youngkin to win. But basically that there's a billionaire backer that would certainly support him and thinks that the money would be there to help Glenn Youngkin, and Bill Barr, the famous Bill Barr, the Attorney General, former Attorney General, is also telling him to put his oar in, and that's a quote. So the Washington Post is reporting Glenn Youngkin might be joining the presidential debates. And that sure would be interesting. I think we do need such a shakeup. Well, that's all the show we have today. We really appreciate you tuning in. Hope you had a great time, and share it with a couple thousand of your closest friends. That's the country. See ya.
Up with you. Pretty soon they'll be begging you to support this and that and give it all away. But we'll stay in the country. Now eyes watch what we do. The end to carefreeness for fear of the news. Listen, can you hear him saying?